jam-packed show for you today on the portal. Where will Javari Flowers go? Jared Curtis, recruiting commitments, and much more on the portal.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the portal. My name is Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. I'm going to be here every single day, at least once, oftentimes two or more times, talking college football recruiting with you, the fans, talking about NIL, the transfer portal. So get used to coming in here and checking it out every day. I'm going to have something for you no matter what team you root for. It's going to be a blast. Today's show is jam-packed from start to finish. We're going to have some NIL breaking developments towards the end that is going to change every college football program's landscape of what they're going to do. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the portal. We're going to talk about several commitments. And we're going to start off with these two young men, Javari Flowers and Jared Curtis, two players from the class of 26. Although the very first, Javari Flowers, is reclassifying to 2025, and that is where today's show begins. Javari Flowers is a corner at a Northwestern high school in Miami, Florida, one of the top players in the country, offers from just about everywhere. Miami, Florida State, Georgia, Florida, you name it, they've offered this young man, and he has an opportunity to go and do whatever he wants. Well, he just wants to do it a year earlier. So how does this change things? First off, when a young man reclassifies, the timing of that is huge. The traditional, as they say, National Signing Day is on the first Wednesday in every February. Well, that's coming up this week, but at the same time, because he's decided to do this later, he still has plenty of time to decide. Most people think you have to sign on signing day or that week. That's technically not true. He could actually enroll at the school of his choice this next summer. The NCAA would like him to sign by April 1st or whatever, but legally speaking, Javari can drag this out a really long time. So could anybody else. But besides that point, he still needs to take official visits. As I was scrolling my timeline on X, well, there's Javari. He's sitting there with Crime Dog from Auburn who just stopped in to see him. That's another school trying to get in the mix with him to get an OV. The Auburn Tigers are very heavily involved in the state of Florida, so that's not shocking. But again, Oregon, Florida State, Florida, Miami, across the country, Georgia's involved. He has a lot. And what does this young man bring to the table? Flowers, for me, is a national top 50 kid conservatively, possibly top 25, depending on how the rest of the spring goes. But he was dynamite at Battle Miami. And I think you're going to see his list of schools as it dwindles be very competitive. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't want to pick where he's going to go. But there are a few schools to think about beyond the obvious names. Louisville and Arizona State are a couple that On3 mentioned with him. They have NIL to use, especially Louisville, so don't forget about them. Javari Flowers, do not forget about this young man, one of the top corners in the country for 25 now, not 26. The other top prospect to know for today is Jared Curtis. Depending on what team you follow, you've probably heard about him if you follow recruiting at all. Jared is an elite prospect. I saw him last year at Under Armour in Nashville. One of the most incredible individual plays I've ever seen at a camp came from him. It was a very windy day, not good for quarterbacks at all. And Jared got a pass on a shotgun snap and just completely thrown to the side. It was basically fumbled to him. And it was a one-on-one play. It wasn't just a route on air. So he had to make an on-time throw. So he picks up the ball, and from a side, he just underarms it, almost like Kent Colby from the late 1970s with the Pittsburgh Pirates. It throws a bullet to a guy on an out route. I was standing behind him on the sidelines when I saw it, and I said, okay, obviously this kid's arm strength is different because he was throwing into the wind when he did this. Jared's arm I knew was good already from all the routes that he'd thrown prior to that, but like he's falling over and throws it basically submarine style and puts it on the money. I mean, that's not normal. But he's also a kid that's had offers for a long time, and some think he's the best player in the country for the class of 26. And to put it in perspective, 24/7 Sports has him as the lowest ranking of number 7 overall in the nation. Not number 7 quarterback, number 7 player. That's his lowest ranking from ESPN, Rivals, On3, or 24/7 Sports. Obviously, he's a great prospect. On that day, I remember thinking to myself, there's really no way this kid doesn't end up a 5-star. It's kind of hard to see him even outside the top 10, and that's really where he's at. Off the field, Jared is an absolutely great kid, and I can see why his official visit list is getting very competitive. Schools from everywhere, kind of like with Jabari Flowers, are all over him. The one-time Georgia commit is still looking at the Bulldogs, recently had an in-home visit with them. Auburn just came by. Georgia's been around, South Carolina, Florida State, numerous other programs. If you go on his timeline, he has a bunch of photos. But right now, these are the 4 visits that I know of that Jared Curtis has. The 6'3", 225 quarterback out of Nashville Christian in Tennessee has Auburn on May 16th. June 6th is Oregon. June 13th is Georgia. And then finally, South Carolina on June 20th. That's a really unique flavor. You got 3 traditional South teams, and then you got team way out west. That's Oregon. They always seem to be the fly in the ointment. You never know what's going to happen with Oregon. And Jared's such a great prospect that, quite honestly, just so many teams would want. I wouldn't want to wager again. Kind of like with Jabari Flowers, where he would go. Jared's been committed to Georgia, then backed off, and now is going through the process. This could be a very interesting situation because if he commits early to any one of these schools, it changes the dominoes for the other schools. Who are they going to go after? Many people have him, again, like top quarterback on their board as a college, not just the recruiting institutions. We're talking about like rivals, but this could be the top guy in the country. And he's not just a pocket quarterback. For those of you that heard me say Georgia, think, oh, he's just a traditional guy. He had 18 rushing touchdowns last season at Christian and over 600 yards. He also threw for 40 touchdowns and over 2,800 yards. Doesn't play against top competition, but he dominates it as he should. This is a young man that will play early somewhere in college football. And quite honestly, he's the kind of guy you root for. Just talking to him at the event last year, he was awesome. And I really hope that I get to see him again very soon because he's a lot of fun to be around. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the big battles going on in recruiting, several commitments. That is next right here on The Portal. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, excitement, and connection with fans is unmatched. You got the Super Bowl coming up, and if you've ever been to a playoff game, it is awesome. There's nothing like the excitement of an NFL game right there in front of you. This year, Gametime makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with a new feature, Gametime Picks. It filters out all the fluff and allows you to show the best deals right there for you on your iPhone or whatever device you have. I can use Gametime Picks for anything that I go look at, whether I'm looking at going to a baseball game or Orlando Magic, whether it's hockey or anything else. And if you want to go to a musical or something like that, you can do it too. The other advantage with Gametime that I personally like is the ability to see your seat from your phone or tablet. All you got to do is click on it. It'll show you that seat in the direction towards the venue, the pitcher's mound, the stage, whatever it might be. It's awesome. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. There have been a lot of commitments very early this year in the recruiting cycle for 2026. Why that is, I'm not sure. Maybe it's partially NIL. Maybe it's all these kids taking visits, the 7-on-7 circuit. Got a guy coming on later this week talking some 7-on-7. That's a major coach, by the way, so that's a little precursor. But whatever the reason, there are just a ton of kids that are making decisions. And to be honest with you, it's fun for me. So let's talk about some of them right now here on the portal. First off, Tyler Merrill, offensive lineman out of Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, Cumberland Valley. He just committed to Notre Dame over Bama, Clemson, Penn State, several others. Really good prospect. I saw a photo of him, and I'm like, that doesn't look like what the weight is listed at. I forget which service it was, but he was listed at 338. And I'm like, 338 pounds does not look like that. He's dropped weight. He's in great shape. Congrats to the Irish on that. But in that note, Notre Dame has a really unique battle going on that I'm not so sure they're going to win. They are battling with Texas for a legacy recruit to the Longhorns, and that is Caden Finley, a wide receiver out of Aledo. That's the greater Dallas area, in case you're not familiar with it. that is a great program, and they've had kids go all over the country for the last several years, Oklahoma, Texas, you name it. He said recently of his Notre Dame visit, Notre Dame is definitely a special place. I love it. He's also the son, though, of former Green Bay Packer and Texas Longhorn, Jermichael Finley. So he has a lot of different opportunities, and he visited several different schools. The 6'2", 190-pound wide receiver is a route runner first and foremost. He's worked with several of the trainers, Hooks, and some other guys in the Dallas area. They're famous. And I think he can be an impact player somewhere as a really good number 2. And if he adds just a little more speed, he could be a number 1 at an elite program. The size is there. The route running is there. And I think it's really unique to have battles like you have Stanford or an Ohio State, Notre Dame, schools that just always seem to recruit nationally for whatever the reason. When they come into a school like Alito in the Dallas area, you have all these different programs coming after him. Where do they set the visits? So he took his unofficial to Notre Dame's junior day. He's been to Texas multiple times. This is the kind of fun stuff that got me involved in loving recruiting. Finley's just an example of it, and I wanted to bring him up. Plus, I mean, Notre Dame and Texas, they were 2 of the 4 teams in the Final Four, 2 blue bloods in college football, and above all else, humongous fan bases. So you're probably going to hear a lot about this kid, and I just loved his film. So I wanted to bring up Caden Finley as a guy that is really deserving of some praise. As for commitments, getting back on that theme, hats off to Baylor. This is really random, but staying in the state of Texas, they're killing it. Their 6 commitments are all from the Lone Star State, every one of them. They just got a kid by the name of Jamarian Vincent from Connolly High School in Waco, where Baylor is at. His film is ridiculous. He's projected to play corner. Maybe he could play safety. Maybe he could play running back. Maybe he could play receiver. It doesn't matter. He makes guys miss in space, and it's hilarious. His film is great. If you have not seen Jamarian Vincent, go look it up on Huddle. It is worth your time. Again, tip of the cap to everybody in Baylor's football program. They're getting a lot better. And I know Dave Aranda, a lot of people were down on him, myself included. They kind of turned it around some. Maybe they figured it out. They've changed their NIL. They're doing some good things. This is the kind of kid that you can change your program with. Because you think of Baylor, you think about throwing the football, scoring a lot of points, etc. And Dave Aranda and his staff have changed that a little bit, but they haven't been consistent on defense. You keep getting kids like Vincent, that can really be a difference maker. They also got London Smith recently, another kid, ironically, from Waco. He's from University High, right down the street, obviously, for Baylor. And that's a kid that can really run. If they're going to beat the teams in the Big 12 and make a chance for themselves to get in the Big 12 title game and win a championship and get to the playoff, they got to win their own backyard first. And I mean, literally, in Waco. They got London Smith. They got Jamarian Vincent. And again, 6 commitments already for Baylor, all from the state of Texas. Going around the nation, there's a quarterback that I didn't know much about until I saw him at Battle Miami. Briggs Cherry. He's from the Baylor School. It's a boarding school in Chattanooga. Really, really good program. Jeff Brom knows quarterbacks, the head coach at Louisville, and I agree with him. He just got the commitment from Briggs Cherry this week. That's a kid that's 6'4", can really spin it. He can move around, but probably more pocket as a general rule, and that fits Louisville. Do not sweep on Louisville as a program long-term. Myself, and quite frankly, many others, talk about Louisville needing to do better at the high school level. This is doing better at the high school level. Congrats to Jeff Brom and his staff for getting this kid. When I saw him, I was really impressed, and several of us from On3 and Rivals and 24/7, everybody that's in the industry that saw him were like, he's really good. I think this kid can play for wherever he wants to go. He could make a dent. I mean, if he went to Georgia, it wouldn't have surprised me. If he went to Texas, it wouldn't have surprised me. Hats off to Louisville. Speaking to hats off, and probably a bigger surprise, maybe the biggest surprise that I've seen in the last month in recruiting for the class of 2026, Jarius Rogers commits to Syracuse. Now, they do a great job, Brand Brown and his staff. They do a really good job. But getting a kid from Fleming Island, which is just outside of Jacksonville, Florida, to commit to Syracuse in January is about as out of the box as it can get. That's still Syracuse. No offense to them. That is always going to be a basketball school first in my eyes. But that being the case, Fran Brown and his team did well down the stretch. beat Miami. They had a good season overall, and they were one of the darlings of college football in 2024. But getting a 6'5", 200-plus pound pass rusher with enormous upside that schools like Florida State, Florida, Notre Dame want, that is a huge win for Fran Brown and his football program. I didn't expect that. When I read it, I literally had to look at it twice. And to be frank with you, I'd imagine many coaches that saw that were surprised too, because nobody that I knew, at least, thought that that was going to happen. The Cuse, they're doing really well. The last I saw, they had 9 commitments, 3 of which are from the state of Florida. They're doing really well. Maybe Syracuse, much like Baylor, is one of those teams on the rise, and it wasn't just a one-year wonder. If they can continue recruiting like this, Syracuse is going to make some noise and be a bigger problem in the ACC than they were just in 24. They could be a team eventually that's a contender. What makes them different than the vast majority of upstart programs, they're not just winning now with transfers. If you look at the teams that made the Final Four, especially O-line, they recruited kids out of high school. I think one O-lineman out of Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State that was a starter was a transfer. If you're going to win big time, you got to win at the high school ranks. And one of those kids, by the way, that Syracuse has committed from Florida is a big-time offensive lineman. So you got to, again, give credit to all those people there at Syracuse. They've done a tremendous job. Next, staying in the state of Florida, but a kid that's staying home, Amari Clemens. I love this running back. This is a great story, and it's one of the reasons the Deep South is so fascinating from a high school recruiting perspective. He's out of Mariana High School. It's just off I-10, a little bit west of Tallahassee, and that's where he's going to be going. He's going to Florida State. He's like an hour and a half away. Small town, 1A, 2A school, but you watch the film, Amari Clemens is the kind of guy that can make a difference early in his career, no matter where he's going, but he's going to be a Florida State Seminole. His film, because he'll make guys miss, he will run over somebody, and he can get around the corner and beat you to the end zone, even if you have the angle. I'm not sure what kind of situation he's going to walk into at Florida State because rosters change every year, but it would not surprise me at all if he had a chance to play as a freshman in 2026. Florida State got a really, really good player right there. Finally, here on the news with commitments, I don't know where this came from either. Kind of like with Syracuse, this was a little bit on the outside for me, but Kansas got 7 commitments just from January 22nd through the 28th. And they also have 9 in the month of January. So they've done something here that's right. Lance Leipold and his staff have done a good job. And here are a couple of guys that are very important. And I just want to bring this up because talking about the trenches, the teams that were good and they made the playoff, the teams that advanced, what did they have? They had fronts that were really, really unfriendly to run on. Not fun to run against Georgia, Notre Dame, Penn State, any of the Texas, any of those teams that got into that final group. It was crazy, even the 12 for the most part, but Final 8 and Final 4, those teams, they had fronts. Well, 2 of the kids they have committed for Kansas, this kind of goes outside the box for them. One of them is even from Oklahoma. This really shocked me. Santa Fe High School is a tradition-rich program, and Landon Anderson, 6'4", 270-pound defensive end, is a 4-star by Rivals. He's committed to Kansas. Hats off to the Jayhawks. Also, another offensive lineman, Caden Snyder. So on the other side of the ball, offensive tackle from Salina, right down the road from the University of Kansas. It's a big boy. Offensive tackles are hard to get, especially in the portal. You need to get them in high school. Going to talk about that a lot here on the portal. He's committed to Kansas as well. It's a tip of the cap to the Jayhawks because nobody expects them to be a dominant recruiting program, but they're doing a really good job. When we come back, we're going to have a little bit of portal news and then some NIL landscape changing because everything is about to change again. The little bit of portal news that I want to mention is former center for Notre Dame, Pat Coogan. The starter is now a graduate student, and he has entered the portal, and he is going to Indiana University. That's a really big pickup for IU. They had several guys on their offensive line this year. They were good players, but they were juniors and seniors. They didn't have a lot of guys coming back, not as much depth as they needed. big pickup for them. He had multiple years as a starter at Notre Dame, but he may not have been the starter next season because he'd been beat out and that guy got hurt. Now he's coming back. So I guess Coogan wanted his best opportunity to jump into a program where he was going to be the guy. And he's a grad student. Why not change schools, get a different perspective? So hats off to Pat Coogan for getting a chance to get a new start and maybe get a chance to go to the National Football League in 2026. Now for the news that I don't enjoy talking about a lot, but it is bottom line. NIL is a big part of this show and will be every day. But it just so happens that this is the first show, and it's also with a lot of recruiting news that is tied in with NIL, and it's awkward at best. There's a couple of different stories going on, but the most important, On3's Pete Nakos talked about this. The NCAA has reached an agreement on its NIL settlement with Tennessee over the whole deal with the collective. Nico Iamaleava, probably just mispronounced that really bad, but Nico took a trip to Tennessee during his recruitment. Allegedly, it was on a booster's plane. Blah, blah, blah. They wanted to put sanctions against him. The state of Tennessee sued, the state of Virginia. It got ugly. Well, they're settling, according to Pete Nakos. Well, here's the other thing. If that's the case, this settlement, again, according to what Pete said in this article, that collectives can still do business even after the house settlement. What is the house settlement? There's going to be more of a across the board how much money you can spend as an institution, but that will be separate, keyword separate, from collectives and boosters. So there's going to be two entities chasing the opportunity to do business with these players, football and otherwise. And that doesn't even talk about players going out and making an agreement with, a credit card company, a car dealership, producing some kind of ad for a shoe company, whatever it may be. There's still the traditional form of advertising that is NIL they can make as well. So this is a big deal. College football has multiple layers to it in terms of how NIL works. But until this settlement came about, and again, it's ironic, this is my first show here on the portal, but they're going to have this. And the NCAA didn't have much teeth anyway, as it came with all the different collectives and the boosters as it was. Now this makes it clear that they're not going to be able to do anything, most importantly, before the player commits. So it's not just that they're getting money, it's when. I don't know if that was really going to change anyway because it was under the table, but now they can just do it in the face of everything, and it's not behind a closed door, and they can't be reprimanded for it. NIL is here to stay. NIL is going to be a little bit easier to discuss. I know myself and other people in the recruiting media, whether I'm at an event at Auburn or if I'm in South Florida or anywhere else, Under Armour event, recruits will talk about NIL even before this ruling. And we just, you just knew not to really put it in an article or on a podcast or something, or post it to X. But at the same time, this makes it a lot easier. This has been going on for a long time, and that's really good. However, there is something else to talk about here. The House settlement begins July 1st, but because of what just was reported, Pete Nakos, etc., I'm not sure exactly how this is going to go down. The House settlement is July 1st. It's going to be roughly $22 million per athletic department a year. How it's spent and all that will be another podcast. But here's the sidebar to this. Title IX is always involved in college football, whether you want it to be or not. LSU gymnast, and I pronounced this wrong, I apologize, Libby Dunn, she's reportedly worth just over $4 million by On3's NIL evaluation, by the way. She is going up against the NCAA because with her lawyers saying major deficiencies with the structure. Basically, it's too broad. What the NCAA is proposing is giving okay, what's an NIL value for an average athlete, blah, blah, blah. Well, she's saying, well, what's my evaluation? So I can get the best deal from the school or whatever it may be. The NCAA, according to her and her lawyers, are not giving that. So there is a lack of transparency to how the calculations being made for the estimate of lost NIL opportunities, and if the same formula is being applied to all athletes across every sport, according to Dunn. If I were to hire a law firm to represent me individually in this matter, I would want to know how the valuation of damages was calculated specifically to me. This seems to not be the case, end quote. Well, this is a whole nother thing that I could just see going on for years because it's not possible for every athlete. Forget just football, but think about all the athletes in every sport for the NCAA to constantly give them an evaluation, what they should be getting, etc. So I'm not sure how you could settle this and do it in a timely fashion. That's for sure. Not that the courts are quick anyway with anything of this nature, but B, you're talking about a change. For instance, I assume that Dunn is really good, or she wouldn't be worth $4 million. She's got to be one of the best gymnasts in the world at her age. But at the same time, you're also talking about a scenario. What about injuries? What about your ability for a school to look at you like if you're a big time corner that's at Florida State, or if you're at Texas or whatever, you've got one more year left. They might want to maximize that, but they know you're only going to be there 1 and not 2 years. How do those things change your evaluation? There's so many different points to NIL that she brings up a good point. I just don't know if it's fixable, at least not wholeheartedly. What do you think? Comment down below. I'm curious to hear what you have to think here on YouTube. But again, this is a really wild scenario and one that it's probably not going to go away. Last point on NIL, Florida quarterback DJ Lagway just signed a deal with Nintendo and Epic Games. So it's a reminder with NIL that it's not just a booster setting them up or not just a collective. They can go out and get those deals. As I'd mentioned a little bit ago, DJ Lagway is a great kid, obviously tremendous quarterback for the Florida Gators. So that's not really surprising. And that's why you're going to see schools like Michigan State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas, Auburn, Florida, Miami, Oregon, all these different kinds of schools, they're going to find different ways to hook kids up. Maybe DJ got that deal because a booster at UF or somebody in their collective knew somebody or helped set it up or initiate it. I don't know, but they can still go get, that's that third party deal to me. At least that's how I label it, of what can be done for a player with NIL. That's not just the direct booster money. If you want to go get it because you've earned it, by all means. And again, DJ Lagway is a really awesome kid, so he deserves it. Again, thank you very much for stopping in today to check out this edition of the Portal. This is the first one. I'm going to have at least one show pretty much every day unless I'm traveling. And even then, there's a good chance I will. Recruiting never stops. It's 365. Make sure you lock in. So hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe. Share the Portal podcast amongst your friends. It's going to be eventually on every platform you can imagine. Here, real quick, we're getting it all set up here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks to all them for giving me this platform. It's a great situation for me because I love recruiting. And I'm going to be at the Under Armour camps, the Elite 11s, at the OT7s, all kinds of different events all across the spring and summer. So make sure you lock in with the Portal. Everybody have a good one. I'll talk to you again soon.